Chicago, a mob town from way back.
Outlaws. You know, we did what we wanted.
This ain't no toy, G. What it is, homie. Nigga, what?
In a place known for its criminals, Chicago's housing projects were once the breeding grounds for the city's most ruthless gangs.
This is every day, B. This ain't nothing new to us, straight up.
Built for the poor, they were rife with violence and a haven for the drug trade.
You got your blows, you got your rocks, your weed.
Man, the money comes so fast.
It was a gold mine. It was like anything goes.
Rival gangs did anything to control these high-rises.
You're talking about communities that are held hostage.
I heard the gunshot, and his mama came and she jumped on top of him.
If we catch you over here again, we gonna kill you.
You got all these buildings shooting at you at one time, bullets flying past your head. So many different gunshots. Boom, boom, boom.
Welcome to Chicago, a gangster city. December 31st, 1999. New Year's Eve, Cabrini Green. At Chicago's most notorious public housing project, this is how gangbangers rang in the millennium.
We was walking down the streets with AK-47s and all type of, pistols. We would just walk around shooting and doing what we do.
The shooting spree was an annual ritual. Most Cabrini residents knew to stay indoors on New Year's Eve. Some slept in their bathtubs to avoid stray gunfire.
And you would really have to be careful because you don't know where them shots coming from.
Things got so bad that over the years, police shut down the streets around the housing project. At first, for only an hour or so. Later, for the entire night. But securing the streets had an unintended consequence.
It was like to all the gang members and guys who wanted to fire their gun, come on down to Cabrini, we'll just shoot our guns in the air, sell dope. Nobody's going to bother us, at least for a few hours. And it was unbelievable. It was the most blatant disregard for law and order that I'd ever seen.
Chicago is a gangster city, and these are the ways of its infamous housing projects. The first buildings were opened in 1938 as a welfare program for the urban poor. They were meant to offer a clean, cheap, and safe alternative to some of the city's worst slums. But this social experiment soon disintegrated. Gangs turned these buildings into armed camps, thug-run fiefdoms in the midst of the city. High-rise after high-rise served as recruitment centers and incubators for gangs and their violence.
It's always been about power and dope. And if you look at it, they're basically very much like the mafia. You know, they all have their nicknames, and it's all revolving around violence for control.
Rival bangers openly battled for the right to set up shop, with cocaine and heroin as their merchandise.
Many of these young people felt, hey, we're on the outside looking in. Society doesn't want to count us in. We will create our own economy, underground.
We get down. This is how we live.
More than 125 street gangs claimed territory in Chicago, with total membership exceeding 100,000. From the 1970s through the early 1990s, 3 gangs in particular ruled the city's projects: the Gangster Disciples, the Vice Lords, and the Peace Stones. Tens of thousands of residents struggled to live their lives amongst a small but powerful group of gang members. They controlled buildings across the city. And they were all at war with each other to expand their criminal enterprises.
It was a gold mine, not only a gold mine like With no limit, anything goes.
The police could do little to stop them.
My first week in Cabrini, I was driving down the street in a squad car. I heard some gunfire to my left. I looked to my left toward the building. Someone came from my right, reached over the hood of the car with a gun and shot at the building. I mean, it was just wow, I couldn't believe it.
Over time, these high-rises became fortresses where the gangs operated openly. They were the perfect place to set up shop and to evade the police. Lookouts on upper floors watched for squad cars and communicated with other gang members using walkie-talkies.
We had a 3-man, 4-man shift. That means like one person on the back, one person on the front, one person in the breezeway. So when the police come, they hollering "be up" or whatever the word might be, you know what I'm saying, to try to fool the police.
You can't really sneak up on somebody in a 17th floor apartment who runs a dope operation. It's very difficult to get in without going through 17 floors of security. They're literally in forts.
The high-rises also provided plenty of spaces for hiding guns and drugs. Gangs often coerced residents into helping them.
They normally would store the guns in a legitimate person's apartment. There would be a little old lady or a woman with several kids, and they would keep the guns there.
Most residents knew better than to complain to police. It was a tacit agreement between innocents and gangsters.
You deal with the police or you deal with us. Y'all got to see us every day. Y'all not going to see them every day.
As a result, drug dealers enjoyed almost free reign, running 24-hour markets for junkies. They screened their customers and served them with workmanlike efficiency.
If you come in the building, security supposed to pat you down, search you. If you've known, people know you already because you're from the projects or whatever, you go straight up and get your drugs.
For marijuana, it would be like on the left side of the building. If it was cocaine, that would be the 4th floor. The heroin would be like the 9th floor. And we kept the elevators working. We had a person that would ride the elevator up with the residents, the customers.
Dealers made thousands of dollars a day.
I could be downstairs with probably $2,000, $3,000 worth of cocaine, and it'd be gone in probably 30 minutes. It was free enterprise. That meant when the guy come in, if my bag's better than yours, I'm gonna get the sale.
The rise of powder and crack cocaine propelled the Gangster Disciples, or GDs, more than any other Chicago street gang, to the top. The Disciples' leader, Larry Hoover, cultivated a drug empire that, according to the Department of Justice, at one point earned in excess of $100 million a year. A self-proclaimed student of Al Capone, Hoover modeled his organization after the Italian mob and a Fortune 500 company. In prison for murder since 1973, Hoover took the reins of the gang from behind prison walls, sending out memos with instructions to his troops on the streets.
Larry Hoover was the ultimate voice. He was the chairman of the board, and he had underlings that worked for him, who had underlings that worked for them, and then each community had a boss. And these guys ran this thing like a machine.
Everybody just do what's told from the higher spot down, as far as like Larry Hoover told them what's going on. All rules was mainly followed, you know.
Hoover's biggest innovation was a street tax on drug deals. In exchange for the right to sell drugs at the housing projects, dealers had to share 70% of their earnings with the gang.
These guys are minimum wage drug dealers. Most of the underlings make enough money to buy Pampers, buy some sneakers, give their girlfriend some money to help with the rent, and they have to be there tomorrow because it's an ongoing job for them.
Fights break out. It's stupid in a way because we fighting over who finna make this sale, but it makes sense because we all out here trying to eat.
For every building that the Disciples controlled, There was a coordinator who supplied the narcotics to dealers and then collected taxes from them. Hoover's enforcers made sure everyone paid up.
The gangs run every drug spot here in the city. There's no what they call independence. It doesn't work like that.
Selling dope has been the fastest, easiest way for many young men to earn money while growing up in the projects.
It's like, want this piece of candy, this good candy, right? You want it, and it's just that easy to get affiliated.
H2O was 14 years old when he joined the Disciples.
I got involved because friends, seeing the fancy clothes and everything. They come to school with the nice gym shoes on, so, I wanted that.
The gangster Disciples ranks ultimately swelled to 30,000, including members like Toy T, who says he caught his first case, an attempted murder charge, when he was only 11 years old.
95% of Cabrini was GDs, so whatever you've been around all your life, that's what you're gonna grow for the beat, you know what I'm saying?
As the gangster Disciples rose to power, they battled their enemies, the vice lords and P-Stones, for control of the drug trade. Chicago's public housing complexes became war zones, carved up by gang rivalries.
Man, it was so much risk. You facing death in the dough.
The gangs waged a guerrilla war, using sniper attacks against each other.
You would never know. It would be a board in the window with a little crack in it, and you wouldn't know. Only thing you would hear was the gunshot.
Scores of people were shot down by sniper fire, so that this now empty lot became known simply as the killing fields.
A lot of blood has been spilled on that field.
Residents lived in terror. They feared getting caught in the crossfire.
Kids wouldn't even be able to come out and play, you know what I mean? Because so much gunfire, parents scared for their children. Bullets would come through your living room window.
Snipers perched in their high-rises, even shot at police and paramedics.
You automatically got out of your vehicle with your weapon in your hand. And and always looking at the building, and not lingering to get in the building because that was the only cover you had.
Once inside the buildings, police rarely, if ever, found the snipers, who used an elaborate tunneling system to escape.
So on the top floors, we put holes in all the walls, so we can go from one building to the next. Like if the police would chase us, we would run up to the 10th floor and go through the holes in the walls. And we would come down in the other building. All the time, the police in this building.
It was like a nest. It was actually the perfect place to commit a crime.
By the 1990s, Cabrini Green, one of Chicago's most notorious housing projects, had earned a reputation as a Wild West shooting gallery.
You might be at the store with your mama, your little brothers and sisters. It wouldn't matter. You got these guys who are in the window sniping, shooting people.
Chicago's projects weren't always like this. They were once seen as places of opportunity.
Initially, it started off with the idea that, this will help people get on their feet. They'll move out and move on.
The city first broke ground on Cabrini Green in 1942, building dozens of row houses over a slum so dangerous it became known as Little Hell. These units initially housed the working poor, mostly Italians. But over time, that changed. During the 1950s and 60s, African Americans from the South flooded into Chicago looking for a better life.
You're talking about folks coming up from places like Mississippi and Arkansas who were very poor and uneducated. As they were coming up, many jobs left the cities, which left many neighborhoods like Cabrini Green in chaos.
These new arrivals required additional public housing units to be built. But many white city councilmen refused to allow them in their wards. Mayor Richard J. Daley appeased them by building several new projects on the traditionally black south side of the city. The largest were the Robert Taylor homes.
It had 25,000 registered tenants. And you probably could add 3 people to every lease. So now you're talking about, in that community, 75,000.
By 1975, 92% of the people here were on public assistance, and there were nearly 3 children for every adult, most of them single mothers. Chicago police officer Eric Davis patrolled the projects where he'd grown up for 18 years. He says it was the federal welfare system and the flaws in its design that tore families apart.
Well, we'll give you public aid, we'll even increase it for you having more children, but the father or the husband can't be in the home. And they would send out the social workers to check, and he would be gone for a week because he never knew when the social worker was going to come. And after a while, he just wasn't there at all.
Within a few years of opening, conditions in these buildings deteriorated to the point of them being just as bad as the slums they replaced.
Urine in the hallways, urine in the stairways, urine on the elevators, lights knocked out. It looked like a war zone.
Chicago's housing projects became islands of poverty and incubators for street gangs. Gang life gave a whole generation of young black men a sense of identity and belonging.
You don't have no good role models around you every day. When you're around negativity every day, you know, this like a magnet. It's like a magnet. It's gonna come to you.
Men like Larry Hoover, leader of the Gangster Disciples, lured young recruits with the promise of fast, easy money selling drugs.
Mom's got to dealing with the drug thing, so she couldn't provide the way she used to, you know what I mean? So eventually I turned to the streets and was able to get all the things that Mom was lacking on.
Hoover also offered something unique: respect.
Outlaws in the hood.
The man speak love, you know what I'm saying? Honor and respect, you know what I'm saying? And if you make somebody embrace someone and make them feel like you really love them, you care about them, of course they're gonna follow you.
Hoover required the disciples to live by a set of laws that were distributed in printed form to all members. These laws prohibited them from using drugs and stealing from or showing disrespect to other members.
90% of the men in ghettos work with a pride thing. You wasn't gonna get respect if you wasn't giving it.
They also followed what they called the 5 Ps.
Proper preparation, prevent poor performance. Everyday life things, you know, keep yourself up to par, you know, like a man or a young man supposed to. You know, look nice, first appearance mean everything.
I live by this, and whether some people know it or not, some of the laws and policies that we do abide by, it's not to destroy man, but it's to create one.
But the most important of all laws was the one called silence and secrecy.
See no evil, speak no evil. Whatever we talk about, everything we go through, if nobody else seen it and it was something drastic, it's between me and you. That's our law.
Cabrini Green became a world unto itself, run by the laws of the street. The rules for the rest of the city didn't apply inside the project, and Cabrini law extended to the Chicago Police Department. July 17th, 1970, Cabrini Green is launched into infamy. Sergeant James Severin and Officer Anthony Rosado were at Cabrini as part of an all-volunteer program working to build relationships with the community. They were crossing a baseball field when 2 snipers took aim.
They intentionally shot these 2 officers. Intentionally, yeah. It's an out-and-out murder.
Severin and Rosado were killed, police say, to seal a truce between two rival gangs, the Gangster Disciples and the Cobra Stones. But the snipers didn't stop there.
One of the officers that went out there out onto the field to retrieve, I believe it was Officer Severance. The rounds were coming, they were still shooting at them, and the rounds were coming off the ground and around the car.
No one else was killed, but the incident confirmed who was in charge at Cabrini Green. The truce that sealed the fates of Severin and Rosado was short-lived. The Disciples and Cobra Stones soon started shooting at each other again, and at the police.
It wasn't uncommon to have gunfire erupt, especially at police. Maybe not intending to hit the officer, but certainly to scare him away, let him know this is our turf.
In the spring of 1981, Chicago Mayor Jane Byrne vowed to end the lawlessness and improve living conditions at Cabrini Green. She moved into an apartment at the war-torn housing complex, flanked by police and bodyguards. Reporters asked the mayor when she planned to leave.
When I think people think they can look out a window and not get shot.
The mayor got a first-hand look at the deplorable living conditions there. From the vermin-infested apartments to the broken-down elevators.
If you lived on the 15th floor, you walked up with your groceries, you walked up with your children.
Conditions improved during the mayor's stay, but the experiment lasted all of 3 weeks before Byrne returned to her luxury condo less than a mile away.
Because while she was there was no drug dealing. There were no gang shootings. It was utopia. But the mayor went back home and gave the building back to the gang that was there.
The mayor's stay had another unintended consequence. While she was there, the building where the mayor lived had its back doors sealed to increase her security. But once she left, the gangs used this to their advantage. The building became known as the Fort.
So now how this building worked was, they blatantly stood in front of the building and sold drugs. And when we pulled the car up, they walked into the building, closed the door, and walked away. And there was nothing that we could do because we couldn't sneak up the back.
Other buildings soon copied the Fort, finding creative ways to block the back entrances, leaving the only way in through the front door.
So the police actually locked themselves out, because when they come to the building, we just close the door.
By the mid-1980s, the body count at Chicago's gang-controlled housing projects was in the hundreds.
There's been times where I was on my way to school and I done seen dead bodies laying in the hallway, and getting to school and seeing brains outside of the school.
One time, me and my god sisters coming from the store, coming through the building, and guy run in with ski mask on and shot another guy right in front of us. Bullets flew right past our head.
In the 19 months between January 1st, 1984 and July 1985, 13 people were shot and killed at Cabrini Green. The 13th was 5th grader Lakita Crosby. The 9-year-old girl was in front of her building waiting her turn at Doku Deutsch. A gunfight broke out between a vice lord and a group of gangster disciples. A stray bullet hit Lakita in the chest. The shooter, 19-year-old Lawrence Taylor, was horrified by what he'd done.
They had their own code of conduct there, and it's still, I think, existent all throughout their community, is that you don't mess with young kids.
Later that night, Taylor made a deal with the girl's uncle, Gerald Crosby, a fellow gang member. They agreed that if Lakita lived, they would keep the shooting to themselves. If she died, they agreed Crosby would go to the police, and Taylor would turn himself in. Lakita died. True to their deal, Crosby gave the police a full statement. But just as Taylor was being charged, Crosby's fellow gang members beat him nearly to death. In their eyes, Crosby had broken their most important rule.
You know, no matter what happened, you know, you don't tell. You know, if it's a problem, then we deal with it ourselves. You know, you don't involve the police.
Enforcing the gang's rules required a highly structured hierarchy. The project's biggest gang was the Gangster Disciples. At the top of the organization was the chairman of the board, Larry Hoover.
A lot of people like to call them gangs. They're really organized crime. They're no different than the mob, the Italian mob. You know, you have your leadership, chairman of the board, they have a board, they have governors, they have regents, they have guys who run certain buildings.
At the bottom were the enforcers and the foot soldiers. Foot soldiers executed drug deals and guarded gang territory. Enforcers meted out fines from members who broke gang rules. They were also in charge of violations. These punishments were doled out according to the crime.
If a individual was the lookout and the police made the arrest, well, he was violated. You get shot in the leg or shot in the buttocks. You lost your dope, you got violated. I mean, these were things that how to maintain control over the people.
The worst violation you can get was that PhD.
A punkerhead is when your face is all swole up and beaten, your mama won't even know you.
That would be from being disrespectful, insubordinate, you know, stealing, rape, things of those nature.
You done what you was told, you know, and you wasn't gonna be told twice. And guys, you know, honored that.
Mario Morgan should know. He was a senior regent of the Gangster Disciples. He followed orders that came from the top, then passed them along to his subordinates.
I had like maybe 50 or 60 other regents up under me, and whatever I was told, you know, I just, you know, hand down the orders to my regents and made sure that they did what they were supposed to do.
The system kept the leaders shielded from the police.
You might know who the governor is, the reads and all that, but they don't touch drugs. They're not doing no violations themselves. They're not doing anything themselves, but behind closed doors, giving orders to someone else. So really, it's nothing you could do to them.
Like Morgan, most leaders who manage to stay out of prison are vague when describing their former duties. But they admit that they were in constant danger just by being near the top of the gang's food chain.
I meant business, you know. I didn't have any problems nowhere I went. Most of the time, they knew I was coming before I got there, and they was waiting for me and made sure I got back up out of there safe.
For years, these leaders kept discipline within the ranks. But in the late 1980s, things began to change. Members of the Gangster Disciples at Cabrini Green went to war with each other.
It was a building war. It was all one building going against the whole project.
For 20 years, gangs ruled Chicago's housing projects. The Vice Lords, P-Stones, and Gangster Disciples turned buildings into fortresses as they battled each other for the right to run the drug trade. Within the gangs, a structured hierarchy maintained control of members through deadly discipline. In 1989, this structure began to fall apart. It started when a renegade band of Gangster Disciples, led by 19-year-old Charles Big Chuck Dorsey, decided they were no longer going to share their profits with the gang.
They was making a lot of money. So at one point, Chuck came with this idea that they don't need to be disciples, they could do their own thing. So they broke off from Disciple Nation.
The power play by Chuck Dorsey and his men, who called themselves the Renegade Crazy Crew, infuriated the Disciples' leaders.
They say we was being rebellious, but I can't see how when we wouldn't stand for nobody extorting us, you know, taking nothing from us, you know, how they was mistreating all the rest of the, you know, the guys in the organization. We was always like the stand-up guys, you know, the guys who, no, we're not gonna take that from y'all.
Cabrini Green exploded with violence as the renegade crazy crew went to war with the rest of the disciples.
I think that's when Cabrini was more violent because Tech 9 machine guns had just came out and that was their gun of choice.
We were so lucky to have a grocery store like across the street where we can dip off in there, grab some Zuzus and Wham Whams.
You got all these buildings shooting at you at one time, bullets flying past your head. So many different gunshots. Boom, 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 shock, 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 lock, lock, lock.
The war terrorized residents for 2.5 years before the disciples extended a peace offering to Dorsey, a top spot in the leadership, in exchange for bringing his renegade crazy crew back into the fold.
When it came to drug selling, that's the only reason they took him back in the first place. Chuck knew how to make money.
But the power struggle fractured the gang and left members with bitter feelings about Dorsey and his crew.
We might have forgave what you did, but we didn't forget what you did. And then at one point, Chuck became super arrogant. I mean, when they gave him the more rank he got, the more big-headed he got.
The renegade crazy crew stab at defection would be only the first blow to the gang's stranglehold on the projects. 3 years later, an event took place at Cabrini Green that finally sparked widespread public outrage. October 13th, 1992. First grader Dantrell Davis was holding his mother's hand, walking the 100-foot distance from his building to Jenner Elementary School. A sniper, located inside one of the gang-controlled buildings, shot Dantrell in the head.
I seen the fire, and I seen him fall flat on his back. And his mama came and she jumped on top of him.
The suspect, 33-year-old Anthony Garrett, later told police he shot Dantrell by mistake. Garrett said he was trying to take out rival gang members. The first grader had gotten in the way.
I think all across America, everyone could relate to this. He was a kid holding his mother's hand, walking to school.
That was like an eye-opener. Now, we know we have beef amongst each other, but who do these kids have beef with?
Massive police raids followed the murder. Dozens of officers blanketed the projects.
It was bananas. You got probably 30, 40 cars descending on one building at one time. They running in buildings, kicking in doors. They want to know what's your name. They got warrants.
They was looking for guns after that. You know what I mean? And any little tip that they had gotten from their informants, they was going with it.
Calls to bring out the National Guard prompted Mayor Richard M. Daley to announce new measures in the complexes and denounce the gun violence that reigned inside them.
These are not used for pheasant or squirrel hunting in Lincoln Park.
Metal detectors were installed in the buildings. Residents were issued ID cards. The building where the sniper took aim at Dantrell was closed. Its residents relocated. None of this was good news for the gangs or their drug business.
If you was making $1,500 to $2,000 a day, then that dropped to maybe $500-600 a day.
In the face of a massive police presence, the gangs of Cabrini Green agreed to get together to negotiate a truce.
This is bad for business. We're not making money anymore. If there was a truce, a real truce, that was what it's about. We're both losing money.
Over the next year, officers Eric Davis and James Martin brought together leaders from 12 of the city's largest street gangs.
We asked them, why are you fighting? They said, no one ever asked us to stop. We just don't want to be the ones to ask for peace. So we said, you know what? We'll be the voice.
We got to be careful with the mass because they always try to promote the image to the people
Chicago's gangs reached a citywide truce, and for a while, the projects found an uneasy peace.
You hate to say it, but his killing improved Cabrini dramatically.
It was kind of unbelievable because now I'm able to sit up and talk to some of these cats that I've been shooting at or they've been shooting at me. Now we get to see how we think.
But then, 2 years later, in August 1995, another seismic shift rocked Chicago's gang world. Federal prosecutors indicted 39 leading members of the Gangster Disciples on drug conspiracy charges. Among those indicted, Larry Hoover, the chairman of the board. Hoover, already serving time in state prison for murder, had been running the gang's business operations from behind bars. But with him and his top lieutenants now in federal prison, unable to send out orders, the structure of the Gangster Disciple organization disintegrated further. Cabrini Green once again became a free-for-all.
The function thing in Cabrini just stopped completely. Like, it was over with. Do nothing to me, you can get it.
On January 8th, 1996, Big Chuck Dorsey, the only Gangster Disciple board member to escape indictment, was found dead. He'd been shot 8 times in a bar he'd recently opened. Big Chuck was killed by his own gang.
Chuck did what Chuck wanted to do. You know what I'm saying? And some people didn't like that.
Dorsey's murder proved how far the Gangster Disciple organization had unraveled. With its leaders in federal prison or in danger of being killed, few gang members wanted to become the next target.
I could feel like I want to lead it. So we get rid of you, now I'm in charge.
You got guys who've been gang affiliated their whole lives and were aspiring to move up the ladder. Now you can't pay them to take a position.
Without strong leaders to control them, the gangs broke apart into smaller factions.
Instead of having one solid organization, you have cliques. No, we GDs, but we GDs from this block. You GDs from that block.
As the gang splintered, new conflicts erupted over turf and drug money.
Store owners, we protected women, the families. We were doing it for what we believe in.
If we didn't comply, we could wind up being a statistic.
Capone gets all the press, but the gangs in Chicago are much more vicious.
Gangland, next on the History Channel.
From the Aryan Brotherhood to MS-13, the History Channel examines the story of America's most important gangs and how they shaped our history.
Killing's just another part of his day.
Log on to history.com/gangs for your copy of Gangland on DVD today.
By the late 1990s, gang violence in Chicago's projects had changed. Drug convictions of leaders of many of the city's African-American gangs, including the once powerful Gangster Disciples, led to massive disarray and infighting.
The new breed, the younger guys growing up, you know what I'm saying, not respecting anything.
Now, guys know that if someone told them to do something, they can just do whatever they wanted to do instead of doing what they was told, and won't be no repercussion.
Meanwhile, the Disciples and their rivals faced a growing crisis on another front. The government began tearing down their places of business. In 1995, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development took control of Chicago's housing projects, targeting them for redevelopment.
Most of the people who live in public housing are decent folks, but those who insist on destroying other people's lives have no right to expect that taxpayers will pay for their habits.
The plan was to vacate and demolish the high-rises at Cabrini Green and other public housing sites and replace them with mixed-income communities, a catchphrase for gentrification. The Cabrini Green neighborhood was eventually renamed Northtown Village. It was the city's way of trying to erase the negative connotations attached to the area. But many residents did not agree with the demolitions.
Putting us someplace else isn't going to make situations any better. It's still going to be the same thing. We still have to dodge bullets.
By the millennium, the gang's operations at Cabrini Green and the city's other housing projects began to reach the end of the line. New Year's Eve. In what was left of the project, gangbangers took to the streets in a brazen show of lawlessness. 2 police officers videotaped the scene from a nearby fire station. They later showed the footage to their superiors.
From the mayor's office on down, the superintendent said, this can't stand. And they gave me the resources to go in there, but they said, make it stop.
With gentrification efforts underway around the Cabrini Green neighborhood, the pressure was on police to crack down. The following New Year's Eve, then Deputy Chief James Maurer pulled together a force of 400 police officers.
I told them what we were going to be doing. We're literally going to occupy every one of these buildings. We're going to patrol every inch of this place. Well, Cabrini has this reputation, as you know. There were 4, you could hear a pin drop. They looked at me like, are you friggin' crazy?
Maurer and his army of cops went in. Their force in numbers made all the difference.
Not a single shot was fired that whole night, and that was the last night we ever closed the streets down.
Over the next several years, the city continued to vacate its public housing units and relocate tenants to privately owned apartments across the city and suburbs. But there was an unintended consequence. As the buildings closed one by one, gang members from the projects began staking claim to new territory. Violence between gang members from the projects and those from the streets flared up in a violent competition for drug turf.
They're drug dealers. And in their mentality, what I do here in Cabrini, what I do in my new neighborhood, this is what I'm going to do. Not taking the hand that there's already people there doing what you do in their neighborhoods. Now I don't think they're just going to move over to let you try to do it.
It's all how you present yourself. For somebody not to want to confront me and be like, look, you can't live over here. You know, we catch you over here again, we're gonna kill you.
2003, Chicago was crowned the murder capital of the United States with 599 homicides in a single year. Police believed 2/3 of these murders were gang-related. Some say that the mass relocation of people from Chicago's public housing projects fueled the murder rate in other areas.
You have to wonder, why are these numbers skyrocketing like this? What happened from 2001, 2002 to 2003? And then you look and you see these large communities were now being broke down. People were being put in new neighborhoods. So I think it would be fair to say that this was some of the reason.
The number of murders since has dropped significantly, but Chicago still has a murder rate 3 times that of New York City. The gangster disciples, once run like a large corporation, are now broken into rogue cliques with no loyalty to anyone.
It's about money now. Everything done changed. You know, it's not about he's GD, so I'm gonna help him, support him.
Don't nobody respect nobody no more. You know, don't nobody care no more.
The new gang ethic has made life on the streets a lot more ruthless than it used to be. Gang members like Fuji, Toy T, and H2O haven't left the gang life, but they say they're not actively involved anymore.
I made up my mind that I was just going, you know, it was time to change my life because, you know, it's an old saying, you know, you keep doing what you're doing, you're gonna keep getting the same results.
You could quit, but the thing is, your background will follow you. But to say, I'm through, especially if you done harmed a lot of people out there, ain't no such thing as I'm through.
I seen a lot of my friends die. Young, growing up, I thought I wasn't gonna make it to see 17.
These are just some of the many casualties of Chicago's housing project gang wars. In some cases, the only photograph relatives had to place in the obituary was a mugshot.
You will always have gangs. As long as you have poor people and people disadvantaged and feel this is the only way of life they have for them, you're always going to have a gang problem.